Welcome to Cartoonist Kayfabe. My name's Ed Piskor.
I'm Jim Rugg.
Jeff Darrow's in the house. Forthcoming is a new Shaolin Cowboy comic. Here are the first ones. Here are the ones that you could grab today. Star Trek, the OG.
Shrimp Buffet.
And Who Will Stop the Rain, man. Jeff, what's the new one called?
Cruel to Be Kin.
7 issues. Going to be starting out in May. Lots of variant covers, including a couple by yours truly, man. The Cartoonist Kayfabe representation is there in full effect.
That's beautiful.
I think those guys at Dark Horse are going to start sliding out our covers when it's appropriate.
I'm excited
and they did pay it, right?
Yeah.
They did, yes. I'm excited.
No,
when I was in Japan, I bought paper.
Yeah.
It's a great, that's such a great industry. So I actually bought paper, and I've been sitting on it for a couple of years. And for Jeff's Shaolin Cowboy cover, that's the first use I've had for that paper. And you can feel it. It does feel, it's nice paper.
That's cool, man.
But you did 2 of them, Jim, and the first one was fine.
The first one, though, was on my regular paper.
No,
not special enough.
Well, I thought it was a very special drawing.
Cartoonist Kayfabe is sponsored by us and the comics that we make. So please support our latest comics, the best way to support this channel, starting with my next book, Hulk Grand Design Monster and Hulk Grand Design Madness. These will be in your stores in March and in April, respectively. These are the main covers here, retelling the history of the Incredible Hulk. 500 plus issues, 10,000 plus pages, retold in 2 oversized issues with some really great variant covers to choose from, including Ed Piskor's, Marcos Martin, Peach Momoko, and whenever we get into the Hulk Grand Design Madness, Jeff Darrow, Ed McGuinness. So let your comic shop know you want these, and it's March, Ed. These are going to be out in stores any minute now, so start picking those up. Speaking of, available now, new season of Red Room by Ed Piskor, Trigger Warnings. Red Room Antisocial Network, the collection, both of these are now available in comic shops all over the world. This is the main cover for Trigger Warnings starting the 2022 season of Red Room. If you like violence and depravity, we're about to up the level of that and start looking for Red Room Trigger Warnings number 2. This is the cover to seek out. That'll be coming to your local store in April. You can also pick up our back catalog from Ed Piskor, WYSIWYG, Hip Hop, Family Tree, 4 deluxe oversized volumes available, as well as box sets telling the history of hip hop. The book that started the Grand Design craze, X-Men Grand Design by Ed Piskor, 3 oversized treasury size edition volumes available telling the complete history of the X-Men. And my books that are still available in print everywhere books and comics are sold. The Plain Janes, the first young adult graphic novel here in America, and Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive. And now back to our regular scheduled programming.
So Jeff, I got to take a look at a couple of those issues, man, when the color came back. And one of the things that really strikes me about these comics is just the imagination involved. There's new, fresh stuff on every single page of your comics, period. And I just wonder, where does that stuff come from? Are you just daydreaming while you're putting the page together? Is it kind of jazzy improvisation, or do you have some idea in mind before you're going into it? Because one of the things I really dig is these are visually inspired comics. No more of that talking heads, dialogue, verbal diarrhea bullshit. These things move.
Well, there is a lot of diarrhea coming up in it. I did send you the lettered pages. I mean, I got them lettered, and I went in and I asked, do you think he could reduce the balloons 15%? Because I cared more about, the drawing. I mean, it's probably fairly obvious, but I start out with, it's always, for me, it's always really normal. Even when I was doing Hardboiled, it was really normal. And I get kind of bored and I go, I don't know, this guy's standing here and he's supposed to be shot at, kind of seeing that. And I go, what if instead of the guy shooting from a car, the car was shooting at him? And what if there's all these dead guys? So, and then you have a whole story like, who are all these dead guys and what are they doing there? And I just start, just like you say, it's almost improvising. It's something like with some of the action stuff. Maybe I've told you this story before. I worked with Jet Li, and I was always curious about how they do those kung fu films, because I mean, you can't really write that stuff. You can't write, the guy picks up a chair, and I asked him, I said, do you guys like go into a room, or if you go into, it's a bakery or a whatever, and you look at what's available there, and then you play with it, and then you come up with that. And he goes, yeah, and that's what I do in my drawings. I go, oh, he's out in the desert. What's out in the desert? What can be done? And then I just, because sometimes I'm just bored. And I go, this isn't very exciting. People are gonna, not much going on to begin with.
Something, it occurs to me that we owe you a giant thank you for a lot of the guests that have come through by way of shoot interviews over the past couple of months. Mike Mignola, Walt Simonson, who there's at least one or two other people that I'm not thinking about, and a few who are coming up. So thank you very much for.
Well, I do that for me. I do that for me as much as for how much respect I have for you guys, because I love to hear what questions you're going to ask, and I learn stuff from listening to it. So it's for me.
It's real fun debriefing with you afterwards. Also, getting like some more context to some of the stories and some further insight. Like just in between switching cameras, talking to Jimmy, I'm like, this channel is insane. Like the stuff that we're able to cobble together, and the insights that we're able to get. It's the stuff that when we were 13 years old or so, we could never dream of. So thank you very much for that, man.
Thank you.
The other thing that I find happens is sometimes I'll get a text after an episode goes live, and I think we should have talked to Jeff before we looked at ranks.
Right.
A lot of insight from that episode. That was a very fun morning for me, like getting some of the feedback on that one.
I was afraid you're going to go, oh, God, this guy should shut up. Mr. Know-It-All. It's just that, I mean, his name is Tonino Liberatore. Tonino, he's just such a funny character. And he, like that last Rank story, he had someone else working on it, because he didn't really want to do comics anymore. And he wanted to, and he got into films. He won the Friendship Equivalent of an Oscar for. He designed the costumes for this live action Asterix movie called Asterix Meets Cleopatra with Monica Bellucci and Depardieu and that, and he actually worked on, I think it was the first Ghostbusters, but he was so slow. By the time he handed anything in, they were already shooting. It was already almost in the can, because he's just notoriously, God, he would sign contracts with people, and then they'd give him in advance, and then he would, the stories would never appear.
Sounds like he should have been a tundra artist.
Yeah.
He knew the first part of what they always tell you to do, which is like, if you are new on the scene and you're given an impossible task, you say yes. So he knew that part, but he forgot that you're supposed to turn in your assignment at the end.
Well, I know about you guys. I won't take money up front, because I just know I don't want to spend it until I've earned it, because I just there's just nothing for me anyway. There's nothing worse than getting that apple that's on there, the carrot that's on the stick, and because I know guys that have done it. And I know, but there's some amazing projects that have come out of that, out of a need for some people to pay their taxes. That's the thing I always hear about you. I mean, you guys, but the people. They get that check and they spend it, and they realize, yeah, but you still got to pay taxes on this shit. And then they find themselves at the end of the year, and they're, Uncle Sam's. Yeah.
That's one of those things, man. There was this program here in Pittsburgh called Flight School, and Jimmy went through the first class of that, and I went through the second, and basically they got some grant funding to put together these programs to take the artists of the region and just put us through kind of administrative paces so that we learn that shit, it's kind of easier. It's an easier pill to swallow when you're with, like, say 15 other very talented people all going through the same boring stuff about, like, maybe you have a separate bank account to put 33% of your money or 40% of your money so that you don't touch it or look at it, so that you pay your taxes, all of that kind of stuff. And I do think, I'm not going to speak for you, Jimmy, but I think that some of our successes came from the thoughts and ideas and just the administrative part of those things that came through those courses.
Yeah, I think about that a lot in terms of, like, figuring out budget and time is you need to do that. That gives you the creative freedom to make the thing you want.
Yeah.
And Jeff, you talk about, like, not taking money in advance or whatever. Do you think that way? Like, do you kind of carve that out of, like, all right, I've got my living expenses covered for 6 months. That means I can do comics for 6 months. Or, I have this story idea and I think it's going to take a year. So I need to make sure I have X amount of money in place, to be able to focus on that.
Well, I never know how much time it's going to take me to do something, but I will. I know in the very beginning, when I was working at Hanna-Barbera, I would put my money aside, and I knew when I'd get laid off, I'd also get unemployment. So I knew that I'd have that for, I think it's good for 6 or 7 months, and that would probably pay my rent. And I'd have money I'd put aside so that I could live, and I'd work on my comics, and I've always done that. When I moved to France, I mean, I'd get an advance, but it was just enough to pay the. But I mean, that's all I wanted to do, and I had a hard time. I mean, the hardest time for me, I think, financially, was when I was living in Chicago, because I had a mortgage and paying the mortgage, and I'm worried about my daughter and that. But I would always, I was lucky that I would get hired onto these movies. And when you work in a movie, the beauty of that too is that they take the tax stuff out, so you don't have to worry about it. And often you'd get some money back in the year because they take a lot of it out. Because they're paying a fair amount of money, and then that would give me enough money where I knew I was good for like a year or two, and I could try to get another comic book done.
Jeff,
this last one, I didn't take any money up front for it until at the end. I started taking some during COVID at the very end, but one of the reasons I moved here was that I didn't have like a big nut to crack.
I always I think all of my projects, like, I get them almost completely finished before I even show them to a publisher, just because at that stage, just like, they can't change much. It's like, take it or leave it. You want it, take it. If you don't, I'll find somebody who wants it. And if not, Kickstart it or something like that.
You get that, Jim, too, that thing where they go, well, how did you, when you were going to do Street Angel, how did you convince them that you'd have an episode where you're going to have a dog in it? I mean, because maybe they asked me that question, I don't ask. Here it is.
They were very good. Image has been very good with the Street Angel stuff. I would just turn in each story when it was done, and they'd be like, all right, great. We need 3 of them to solicit, or, what format do you want these in? But they didn't require anything up front in terms of like, hey, I'm going to do a dog story. It was more of like, here's the next Street Angel, and it happened to have a dog, or it happened to have whatever that story was about. And I'm trying to think, like, they really didn't give any kind of editorial, you can do this or you can't do that or anything. Very hands off in that. It was mostly just, we need 3 of them before we can solicit, and as we got stories started to pile up, then it became like, okay, what's it going to look like to release this?
Jeff, it's funny. Like, I think your editor is Daniel Chabon,
Yeah.
and I've been talking to him for a while about, like, he's interested in, we're interested in working together, but just seeing how the standard system works over there. Like, he asked me all these questions that I can't answer about, like, future comics, like how many issues, like, what's it going to be, like, all that stuff. And I just kind of keep saying, Daniel, like, I'll just make it and show it to you, and then maybe we could work something out, because I can't even, I'm not a salesman like that. Like, I can't pitch you. Like, I think he gets, like, paragraphs from people and stuff.
Yeah, I think he's trying to nail you down so he can actually, make you a proposition so he can get hold of it, because I know he really wants to get you to do some stuff for him. And I mean, I think it's because when I went to Dark Horse, I had this big club named Frank Miller, and since then they just never have ever, I've never even thought about, I'm lucky, pitching something to anybody. Even in the beginning, when I first got printed, it was in France, and the guy that introduced me was Mobius. So it's like, here, I like this guy's what he's doing. Okay, yeah, good. You like it? Yeah. It's like, so I'm spoiled. I always wonder, geez, what if this one tanks and then they're gonna what am I gonna do?
How about this one? And I'm gonna try not to say like a leading question or whatever, but
don't lead the witness.
Yeah. the old wisdom. So you just mentioned you worked on these like film conceptual things, Hanna-Barbera, all that stuff. Like the old wisdom for the freelance illustrator was like, you have your seasonal postcard, every 4 months or something, you have like your postcard that you send out to art directors and you like sprinkle around. Like, how did you, where did all of your opportunities come from? I guess what I'm saying, well, here's the leading question. After sowing those seeds, Jeff, did you do the postcard tract and send it out to various art directors and producers and things like that? Like, did you have the standard path?
I did not. It's, for example, maybe I've told this story before. The Matrix came about because the Wachowskis had seen Hard Boiled, and they wanted someone that wasn't in the Hollywood system, because there's a lot of those guys out there doing this work, and you kind of get the same sort of stuff from the same guys. And they wanted someone, and they really liked Hard Boiled, and they convinced, and Warner Brothers did not want to hire me, because they told me this after. They go, "What do you want this guy that lives in France? Blah 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 blah. We got these guys here." And top of it, there's a union that you're supposed to be in, and it's a union you can only get into if you've worked on a movie, but you can't work on a movie unless you're in the union. So there's this whole weird thing but anyway, which I never joined, because I never thought I'd ever work on more than one. At that Matrix, that's it. I'll never do another thing. So I just, people saw my comics, and then the Matrix is a bit of a calling card. I remember I got called once by the guy that did the whatever company did Lord of the Rings. The guy that ran it, he was going to direct, and he wanted to do some movie, and they called me up. His sister called me and said, "Hi, this is whatever the guy's name was, really likes your work, and he wants you to work on this movie. Can you send us your book?" I said, "I don't have a book." And he said, well, can you send us I don't have anything that I can send you. And I got some books, but you can go to the comic store and pick those up. And she's like, well, well, then how do you get work? I said, because up to that point, people just seen what I did, and they just called me and asked me. I was never asked to submit a portfolio, the first guy. And she goes, so, well, can you send us? And I said, nah, I don't really. And she goes, you're really not trying very hard to convince us to hire you. And she goes, and that's what I think that will really be intriguing to him. Was the fact that I wasn't, bowing down to them. And I've told this story before. I told this to another artist, I'm not going to name him because it might embarrass him, that had worked in movies for the longest time. And he said, they're not calling me anymore. And I said, well, I called them and I wanted this and I wanted that. I said, yes, because, they only want someone they can't have. If you act like you don't want to work for them, and like the following year he comes up to me and he says, Jesus, you're like fucking Yoda, man. I stopped doing it. Now I'm getting all kinds of work. Because Hollywood always wants what they can have. And, but anyway, make a long story.
Running game on them, dude.
Yeah, really.
Yeah,
Hitting him with
just,
the eggs.
I never wanted to. When I was working on the Matrix, the guy who was this producer, and he was like, you come in and I just kind of ignore stuff, and he'd go, you really don't want this job very bad, dude. I said, you can send me home if you want. I don't care. And he was like, well, and that intrigued this guy. Because it just, because everybody else in the the room, they're like, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir, and I'd park in his parking spot. And maybe I told you this story. And he come in and goes, who has a blue, whatever the hell, a satellite? And I said, I said, I have a blue satellite. He goes, are you parked in my spot? I said, well, I was parked in a spot called producer. He said, well, that's my spot. I'm the producer. And I said, yeah, but I produce things. I produce things. I work for the show. So isn't that the same thing? He goes, God damn you, Darrow. And I do this things like that to this guy, and it drove him crazy. And he would come in and like, and Steve Scroce was in the room with me. He would, because he would always come over and like, he would like give me like neck massages. And it was kind of odd. And he was just like, and Steve would go, he likes you. Yeah, I guess. I go, no, I think he really likes you. I could never, it was just the weirdest thing. Is like he wanted to hit me and yet he liked me at the same time.
That is such human psychology.
Yeah.
It's like our foibles as humans. That's how we respond. It's probably not the way we should. It's probably not what's best for us.
Right.
But it's almost an inevitability.
But I'd pull jokes on this guy all the time, and he just wasn't used to it.
Yeah, they get their
he was like in this power thing, and it's like he realized there wasn't anything he could do to me. He couldn't threaten me with taking my job away because I didn't care. And
that's the greatest freedom in the universe, man. It's just that idea of abundance, man, and just like you have everything you need, you have everything you want. Like, yeah, you're doing this. Like, you're not doing me any favors. Like, you could be drawing a new Shaolin Cowboy page.
Yeah, that wasn't like I thought I was. It wasn't. It had nothing to do with ego and the fact that I thought I was this great guy. This and that. It's just like I really like what I'm doing, and you pulled me away from it, and I'll just go back to it. Existed before this movie and I'll exist after it. And they just don't, because I mean, I love those guys. You see those guys working out there, but God, I could never do that. Jumping from, Star Wars one day to Stuart Little on the next. It's like, yikes.
Yeah, and all that Yes Man stuff is just real goofy too. I remember copacetic comics was used as a set in some Hollywood movie, and it was after my first box set came out. I went to the store to go show Bill the damn box set. I was super proud of it, and he's out on, there's like coffee shop, record shop, comic shop, third floor, and he was out on the terrace cafe part just chilling, which is odd. Like, he's always at the shop, and there was school buses out front and wires and stuff going into this building. And I'm like, yo, Bill, what's going on? And he's like, they're using I let them use my shop as a movie set, blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there kicking it with him. It's getting late. I'm going to take him home. And the movie people come down and they're like, listen, we didn't get all the shots we needed. I know that we were signed up for just like, the weekend or this day or whatever, but we're going to need it again. But listen, don't worry. Your shop's going to be in a movie, the guy said. And Bill was like, so what, are you going to pay me? This guy thought that like you'd be so impressed, us rubes here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
right,
are going to be so impressed to be in a movie.
That happens quite often where you'll have people they'll get free catering from places. Goes, well, put your name in the credits. And that doesn't necessarily, it's like, Bill's catering. Well, next time I get married, I'm going to get to Bill because they worked on John Wick 3. This stuff doesn't translate into anything other than you can sit there and go, look, Edna.
It's exposure, right? That would be the thing that you would hear artists get dangled with. We're not paying you, but it's exposure. Think of everybody that'll see this.
Yeah, we'll get exposure out in the winter.
In animation with Disney, because Hanna-Barbera paid better than Disney, but part of your salary at Disney at the time, in the early 80s, was the cachet that you'd say, well, I'm working at Disney Studios. And they did beautiful animation. I mean, their movies were bombing, but they still had that reputation. Hanna-Barbera, it's like, Richie Rich and Pac-Man, and it wasn't exactly, like there's about 10 seconds of movement in each half hour. I mean, if everything is done with, camera shakes and, like Papa Smurf saying, wow, that cat ate Smurfette, and they never show it. You can see they cut to the cat going, meow, and that's it. But whereas over there, real animation was being done over at Disney. But they would do freelance. They'd pick up stuff from Hanna-Barbera because they paid better.
Was Matrix the first film you worked on?
No, I worked on was the thing that I worked with Ridley Scott. I think that was the first thing for a while. That was another thing I kind of walked away from because at the end of it, no one knew what they wanted to do, and they said, "Well, just keep drawing." And I can't, you know. I said, if they want to hire me to create something, that's fine. But there was this sort of amorphous kind of project that is like I don't know what to do. I don't know what the characters are. I don't know what the situation is. And so it just kind of like so many things in Hollywood just kind of went away.
Yeah, I always say like that. That's my third client. Is I'll know it when I see it, guy, and just run away. That's the worst person to work with.
Oh yeah, God. But yeah, to make a long story, I've never had I had a portfolio when I started out, and but once I moved to France and I came back, I never really had to submit anything.
I was trying to figure out the sort of trajectory. So it's like Hanna-Barbera from what years?
Well, I started out in advertising, and then was in that for a couple of years. And then I went about 1979. I moved to Los Angeles, and in '80, because it was a year that The Empire Strikes Back came out, and they needed science fiction was hot. So Hanna-Barbera had sold all these shows. They brought back Space Ghost and the Herculoids. They had Astro and the Space Hounds, and then one of the main characters, they made him look like Burt Reynolds, and it did look like Burt Reynolds. And they had all these, and so they needed somebody to draw spaceships, and I had to show my portfolio. So I worked there 80, 81, 82, 83. And then 83, that's when I moved to France. But I would come back. When I come back, sometimes I'd still get a little bit of work from them. But I moved to France in December of 83. And I was there until probably, I think, 89 maybe. But I'd come back in the summer and I'd get work on occasion at Hanna-Barbera, one of the studios. And then in 89, that's when I started the thing with Frank, because we had struck up a friendship, and it came about to do something.
I was watching this documentary about the Batman animated series, and they were talking about the earliest animated iterations of Batman, Super Friends, and they were talking about like the push pull where you have these superhero figures, but you can't have violence, and so it would be this like standards of practice issue, right? And it would be people who you would mention to me in conversation, Glenn Murakami, some of these other
Bruce Timm and
and there's a lady who was like a producer, like a in charge of a bunch of stuff. But they showed an example of like just how kind of out there the Super Friends stuff was, where the heroes are shrunk down, and Robin like knocks some spiders off a table, and it came back from standards and practices that like we have to know that the spiders are all right. So then there's this shot that's inserted where Robin's just looking over and you see the like spiders like on the ground just like walking away, a little 2-second piece.
And the sound's like
yeah.
Humana. They would tell us that if you had anybody getting hit, they had to look like they enjoyed it. And I remember we had a thing where somebody that had to throw a pie, and they had to make sure. It's like, well, make sure after he gets hit with the pie, he looks happy. And I remember drawing the pie, and I did it because I loved at the time I discovered Akira Toriyama, and it was supposed to be like a cream pie, but I put the top of it, I made it like the classic Japanese poop thing,
like the emoji, yeah.
And it was a chocolate pie. It made it on there. I was like one of my proudest moments.
See, that's those animators, man. You hear about them. There would be like one every Disney feature film. There would be like an issue. There was the cover of Little Mermaid had phallic.
I know who did it. I know who did it.
Oh, that's so sick. Let's talk about that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
On the cover of the VHS cover of the Little Mermaid, the like sort of water palace had like dick citadels and shit. And then
but it wasn't supposed to be.
Oh, was it?
He didn't do it on purpose. No,
It's like
I think I think it's Bill Morrison that did it. I think he's the one.
Oh man,
But
from Bongo Comics.
Yeah, right. Wow.
but they had like a certain amount of time to do it, and it was just he was just drawing shapes, and sometimes it happens. You draw these things like even look like Jeff Bezos, those spaceships. I'm sure didn't anybody start like, God, this look like dicks. Those. That blue whatever, blue Musk or whatever the hell the name of that ship that Bezos or Musk. And even Mobius, he did that when he did the Surfer. I mean, the Galactus's ship looks like a big dick, and it does look like that Elon Musk rocket. And I asked him about it. I said, this looks pretty. You're right.
Jeff, I feel like it always surprises me. You live in France. You seem like a quiet guy, and yet I feel like you're connected to all of these artists. Like often we'll do a video, and then you'll have some insight, that you've gleaned from spending time with this person or that person. How important is it to you to like connect with these other artists? Is that something that you're learning from them or sharing, things with them? How important is that to you?
It is, but I don't think I'm very good at it. I mean, I mentioned before, like even I think when the interview when Mobius died, I said, I was sitting with his wife and for the funeral, and he said, well, I said, I was always worried about calling because I didn't want to bother him. I was worried about bothering people, and he said, well, we always wondered why you didn't call because we thought there was something. But no, I just didn't want to bother him because I figured that he was. The same with them, when they Dave Stevens, all these people, like, I'm always worried about that. I call you guys, I think, because I'll talk for blah, 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 blah. Because I always enjoy it, because, I hate to say this and scare the shit out of you. I could talk to you every day because you're really smart and we like the same stuff. And some of the guys that I went to school with, they kind of like got what I call the art bug. And they'd still like comics, but, they don't know what's going on and they don't really care about them. So I can't call them, wow, did you see this issue where, some manga and it's about these monsters that live in toilets and they're taking over the world. I'm like, man, but Line Decker when he was doing his. I mean, I like that stuff, but I like goofy stuff, and I like comics. I still really like comics. You guys like comics, and I mean, I'm fascinated by the stuff you grew up with because it's like, man,
Here's the exact relationship, Jeff. Like I've had these people in my life forever, and it would be like a super cool, like, big brother figure who introduces me to just crazy new shit that I never knew about. And I think that gets exceedingly hard. Like, just as you get older, it's like you start to see a lot of stuff. But when you start pointing out, the gay sex, Richard Corbin, Doc Savage, Tarzan shit, like, I don't know about that. Never heard about that.
Yeah, it was such a limited thing. I've never seen those drawings printed anywhere either.
It's fantastic, and like, I bring that stuff up like in the in other videos that we did for whatever reason. It was appropriate, I'm sure, for the subject that we were talking about. But then there'll be people in the comments who are like, "Oh yeah, that's this, and this," and like, you won't find the Richard Corbin things, but the prose, that shit is at the Barnes and Noble. You could read the stories, like it's out there, and never knew about it, And every time we chat, I could chat with you every day. Every time we chat, like, I got my little note cards and stuff, and I'm finding new books. I'm about 4 books into Andrew Vax. It's awesome, man. It's really cool, and I honestly feel like my drawing has gotten better, just from our conversations, man.
I mean, I really, again, I get a little annoyed because I think it's so accessible. Everything is so accessible. I'm a kid from Iowa that there was nothing there. And like, I know we talked about this. Comics disappeared from the stores, and I had to like subscribe to them, and they come in that folded because otherwise I just couldn't get them. But whenever I joined the high school Glee Club, because once a year the Glee Club would go on a trip, and they would go to another city, like a major city. And I thought, if I go on that trip, I can get away, I can go, and there's got to be a bookstore, a large bookstore. I can find stuff that I'm not going to find in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And that's where I'd go, and I would. I remember, God, I was in St. Louis, and I couldn't find a bookstore, and I didn't have access to it, but the bus just happened to stop in a small town, and it actually had this great paperback bookstore, and I found all these Frazetta paperbacks that I wanted. I was like, wow, that weren't available anymore. But I'd put up with this Glee Club shit just for this one day out of the year until I eventually got kicked out. But for like 3 years, I go, wow, I got to go to St. Louis, and I got to go to Minneapolis, which seems like, nothing. But in those days, I mean, that was New York to me. But I would look for that stuff. And I know these kids nowadays, everybody else, I don't know, I get a little annoyed when people say, hey, can you give me a list of stuff that da-da-da-da-da? And I say, no, man, just go online and type out, Chambara manga or, and just, discover it for yourself. And I love talking to people that already have this entree into it, but when they don't want to even make a bit of an effort, it bugs me.
Yeah, it's a corruption of choice. Like it's all out there, and it's the thing that happens. You might even every now and then find yourself involved in that when you kick on Netflix with no real agenda, and you just spend 20 minutes looking through the library.
We used to do that when we first, whenever I got to school, and it was like everybody was starting to use digital and design, and the teachers would sort of caution you, like, you can't just show up and think you're going to find your font searching, because like there's 1,000 fonts, you know what I mean? Like you would watch kids in the computer lab spend an hour, in the evening, and they would do nothing except just toggle through fonts, and that was it. It was like there just wasn't. You have to have some urge, some thought that you're chasing. It's so vital though, and I don't know how it is now, but growing up, like I was like a sponge looking for that person that knew something.
Yeah.
And then when you'd find them, Billboy Shell comes to mind. It was like, yes, please, like show me the thing to look at, or point me in that direction, or give me that name, because it was hard to find growing up. Mm-hmm. And now, like you say, Jeff, like everything's available. I always think like I could have probably done 10 years of comic study in a summer whenever I was 12 if I had access to Google now. Because I had names, I couldn't find a Crumb book, right, or even a Kirby book. It's weird how that works, but I mean, it was so vital to me growing up, just finding somebody that knew more than me, and then I would just sort of sponge, walk around and bug them.
Did you guys ever have like what you would consider your kid an adult that liked comics? Because I had one guy like that in my life that was just like, wow, an adult that likes comics. And this guy, he had great days. He didn't like Jack Kirby at all, but he had all the EC comics. He collected them. He had them in this is before they had boxes. He made his own boxes for them. And I was like, wow, I'd go over there and I'd look at him. And he also had these, we talk about Hal Foster, and they did these whole series of, this is the weirdest thing. They took the whole Hal Foster, the Prince Valiant thing, and they turned him into sort of young adult novels. And they just have a panel here and there with text. And he had a couple of those. I remember getting one from him. It was the one that actually had the demon in it that Jack copied for the demon. But it's like, wow, I felt validated that there was an adult that thought this stuff was okay, because my parents were always like, yeah, it's fine. Yeah. But this guy was he did graphic design. And he was a freelance guy. And my mom would not let him come over very often. She wouldn't let him come in the house, because my dad was a carpenter who worked at Quaker Oats, and he wanted to go freelance and just do carpentry. And she was so terrified that this guy would infect him with this, entrepreneurial shit and leave Quaker where he had a solid job. And, but yeah, the guy inspired me as a kid, and told me about Al Williamson and Frazetta. I mean, I knew Frazetta, but Al Williamson, I didn't know who that was. Marie Crandall, and there's Jack Davis, and he had all the Mads, but the comic book ones.
How did you connect with this guy? How did you find out he was into comics, or did he find out you were into comics?
I put an ad in the paper saying, in the one ads, I'm looking for comics, old comics, and he contacted me.
I mean, wow. you were looking, man, joining the Glee Club to get a chance to go to a bookstore, putting ads.
There was nothing else that I got contacted by one guy that ran a big. He was the head of Caterpillar that made those big things, and he collected Tarzan books. And he had me into his office in this leather chair and stuff. And here's this, fat, 12-year-old kid and we're talking about J. Allen St. John and Tarzan books. And it broke my heart because he had the Tarzan books, but he liked the colors of the bindings. So I took the dust jackets and threw them all away. And I was like, oh. Wow. And that's the stinking J. Allen St. John paintings, the beautiful paintings. But I got to talk to him about Tarzan, and he gave me an extra that he had, which was kind of cool. But this guy must have been, to then for me, he was old. He was like in his 50s. He was like, wow, guy that age, and he still digs Tarzan.
Growing up, I don't think I had somebody to talk to about comics until I went. Art school doesn't even count. I feel like until I met you, like I was like 21 years old before I really had somebody that I could engage with about comics. And as a kid, I remember thinking like, if I just met somebody, that could like double my knowledge somehow. It would be twice the brain power, and then I would be able to accumulate a little bit more. I got that with you, Jim, when I connected. But like Jeff, when we were talking about like what videos, like what kind of comics we could look at. Like, you're that guy for me, man, because it's like, all right, let's do Ralph. Oh, Uncle Jeff, I don't have it. Let's do Cobalt 60. Oh, man, I don't have it. I got to get it.
Yes.
We got to get it. Kayfabe's P.O. Box 3071, Munhall, PA 15120.
I saw I saw some copies of the because there's only 2 stories of Cobalt. And they are some on eBay. They're like about 10 or 15 bucks.
That's manageable.
They're in a magazine called Young Waffle. And I think it's in number 2 and number 4, but one of them is a full story. The other one is just like a lot of text with, pencil drawing. But
we need to track those down.
We really do. Like Ralph has an important place in my heart too, because there was this book. It was a book about making comics. Like we did a video about it. I got it, but I forget what it's called already. But it was a book I took out of the library so often as a kid. And it also is juxtaposed with child art. And there's a page of Ralph in there, first person point of view, holding the gun turret on these like approaching gorilla alien type dudes. And just like that shit is dope. I always wanted to read that comic. And I was for years telling people about this scene. And it's a Richard Corbin comic. I remember reading his name. They're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I was explaining it wrong or something, but that's the joint, and it's from Ralph. So it's like I've been wanting to read that comic for almost 40 years.
And he wouldn't. Now he's passed, but he wouldn't allow them to reprint it because he wasn't interested in all that. Just the new stuff. That's all he wanted to do. It's like, my God, because I told you, I've got this oversized. The French did 2 oversized comics. They did Cobalt, and they did Raw. Wow.
Did you ever?
And that was a comic I had to hide from my parents because I had nudity in it.
David Cho described it, Richard Corbin's art as horny.
Yes.
And that feels appropriate.
Yeah. God, I mean, you draw those voluptuous girls that,
And big ass dicks, man.
Oh my God, yeah. I always kind of wonder what was going on with that. But that was kind of like, I always think like Japanese films. I don't know if you ever see that Hattori, the Razor, Hattori the Razor.
No.
It was done by there's a Lone Wolf and Cub, and he did another series about a policeman, and he would like sexually torture witnesses, and they made films of it with the guy that played Zatoichi. And like there's one scene where there's women on like a bamboo basket, and he lowers them on top of his his junk, and he spins them around, and they're screaming in pleasure. And he's asking them questions, Hanzo the Razor, I think it is. And you can find him. And like, they're screaming, oh my God, okay, I'll tell you, it was, Monsieur Futamushi, and he's doing this. And then they even do these things where he would like train sexually. He's like screws rice bales, and they just show him pounding away on these things and boom, boom. And then another thing where from the back, you see him and he's pounding on something like on a wooden butcher block, and he's like toughening up his penis. But they show the indent in the wood, and it's like, like 2 feet long. This actor's probably got one like this, But yeah, they're so fucking crazy.
And this is how it works, ladies and gentlemen. Like we get in a conversation with Uncle Jeff, and then here's the list book, and Hanzo the Razor is in
Hanzo
on the hunt
right.
now.
The thing are called Swords of Justice, and he's like the typical. I was used to seeing him as Atoichi, and suddenly he's got the shaved the head with the ponytail, and he's got the stanchion, or that's how you say it, the kind of a tripod, not a tripod, but it's like a metal fork kind of a thing that they give to the constable. He's a constable. Oh my God, there's like 3 of these films.
That's the funny part is it's a franchise.
Yeah.
Well, it's based on the comics that it was Kojima and Koike.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's like I don't know how many of them there are. I don't know if those ever been printed in English.
So wild, like their collaboration. I mean, when Samurai Executioner started getting put out, like it's like they did 8,000 pages of Lone Wolf and Cub, and a new series, a different series.
Right.
Yeah, and then he did this Hanzo the Razor thing. But I guess go back. I would another thing was when I would go to when I was in commercial art, we'd sometimes have to go to other cities, and I always get in the phone book and I'd look up bookstores and I'd look up foreign language, and if there was a French one and there was a Japanese one, I'd go to them, and I'd go in there and the Japanese one I would just they had the manga, and back then they didn't cover them in plastic, and generally they were like binding out, so you just have to pull one out and kind of look at it. And that's where I first discovered Kojima. I pulled one out and was, holy cow, these great samurai stories. And I think it's the story that I understand Larry Hama, I read this interview with him where he said where he went in there and he like bought, the Lone Wolf and Cub comics. He was taking them into Marvel and giving them, or into, I think he worked at the Continuity. He was giving them to people. Because I still got them all. I got them all. They're all in Japanese. I couldn't read them. But I could read them because you just look at them. The storytelling is so fantastic. But I couldn't, this is the thing, you show it to people and they don't want to look at it. They're like, I can't read it.
I think I would hear that story differently.
Yeah,
and it would be Larry Hama would bring, or whoever would bring those books to Continuity, and then somehow Frank Miller would find them and take them home.
Like they would disappear. like
Right.
Larry wasn't giving them shits to anybody, man. He would take them, put them down, and then wouldn't know where they were.
But oddly enough, I'm with Frank, and he loved Shogun Assassin, which I think, it's fine, but it's still they've changed it. And for me, I've seen the originals, and he was living near Little Tokyo. They're like 2 blocks, and we're at the center. And they'd opened up a new theater, and I took him to see a Lone Wolf and Cub movie they hadn't seen, and he was like, yeah. Mm-hmm. But he still liked that Shogun. I go, yeah, but Frank, and I said, they're showing the other 3. You want to go? Yeah, maybe. Yeah. And he never wanted to go. Yeah. Because they're fantastic. I mean, they're just amazing movies. They're so crazy.
It's so interesting because, I mean, he's so associated with that stuff. There was that great comics interview, David Allen Kraft issue, where he's interviewing those guys, and it had to be done through intermediaries, through fax machines, and over the course of like a long period of time where they're sending international faxes to, I don't know, Kodansha or something, and Frank has to ask the most basic ass questions. Then it has to get translated into Japanese over at the first offices. Then it gets faxed over, and then comes back and then gets translated for Frank, and then back and forth like over a period of months.
Well, when I was in Chicago when I first moved there, there was near a movie theater. There was when Blockbuster still existed. It was a place that had videotapes, and I went in there and they had painted on the wall one of Frank's covers from the Lone Wolf and Cub. This one where he's standing there with a baby cart. I'm looking at this thing, and it says, written on the wall, it says, a tribute to Lone Wolf and Cub and Koike and Kojima. And I said to the guy, I said, that's a tribute to Koike and Kojima. I said, yeah. Then why do you have a drawing by Frank Miller? Why don't you have somebody do one of the drawings from, if you're going to make a tribute to someone, why would you not use the actual material? And he goes, oh, we couldn't find one. And it was just some bull. I could tell he's like stuttering and stuff because I got to, come on, man. I mean, there's so many beautiful panels in there. I mean, they did a great job, but I just thought, well, come on.
For a certain kind of reader, it's invisible. Like the elves made the comic. It's
Yeah.
about the experience. You know, it's about the flow and all that kind of thing, man. But the creators, when cosplay started getting big, I remember getting brought out to one festival. Jim Lee was out there, and like someone came up to get stuff signed, and they were dressed like Rogue from Jim Lee X-Men issue #1, and I'm like, oh, that costume is dope. Like, are you gonna go get like Jim? Because there was signatures already on the jacket. I'm like, you're gonna go get Jim Lee's signature, right? That's fun. Who is that? And I'm just like, oh, okay, okay, I get it.
That's the whole movie thing where it was in Utah for some convention in Salt Lake City. And there are guys like real big, heavy duty Marvel guys there. And we're all just sitting there and no one is going up to anybody. Nobody. And one guy happened to come by and just kind of like looking at what I was doing. And I go, oh, do you like comic books? Oh, yeah, I love Marvel comics. I said, what are your favorite one? He goes, well, I don't read the comics. I just like the movies.
The Pittsburgh.
They had a bunch of movie people. They had like Chris Evans was there and a couple other people. So like a gazillion people over in that part. But the part where the guys that actually do the comics, it was like Sagebrush City. It was just like.
Did you ever?
And that was the only convention I ever left early. I left the day early because there was just nothing to do.
Oh yeah, brutal, man. Did you ever go to any of the Matrix premieres? And if so, did you have to go to the overflow theater to see the thing, or did you get to like be in the proper one?
Oh, that was like I went to all of them, and I went to always got to go to Japan. So at one point, the Wachowskis aren't even there. It's me, Keanu Reeves, Jada Pinkett, and Joel Silver are all on stage. It's like I'm thinking, who the hell is this big goofy guy with Keanu Reeves? But yeah, I got to see. No, I was always with with them. They treated me so well, and I saw what that's like to be because Keanu, like, he couldn't go out. They went out with him once, and like they found in Tokyo when they found out he was there, and they had to like call the police and they had to like usher us out of there because he there's just like 500-600 people out in front of the store. So he couldn't go anywhere. And it was so sad. He'd end up staying in the hotel because otherwise it would you'd be mobbed. But so I'd see that we'd all go out to dinner, and people would just come in and like take pictures of him while he's eating and ask for things. And it's like that's their one chance. You kind of understand it. And the paparazzi are always there because like the guys that ran the hotel would call and go, yeah, they're heading over to the Lido for pizza. So you go over there. And so but when we get to they'd be there already. They knew that the cars were coming. So yeah, I got to see all that flying on the private jet, and God, they had these great. The first movie we all went over and we're going to Kyoto, and they had like these Israeli ex-Mossad guys that were bodyguards, and they were amazing because they were so good with people, and I remember the people were trying to take pictures, and their hands would just kind of float up and slowly bring the cameras down, and just without hurting anybody, but they would just like no pictures. They were just amazing.
I like that move. It was almost like Matrix bullet time.
Yes.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so yeah, I got to do all that stuff, and yeah.
Jeff, last time we talked on Kayfabe, you had mentioned having a chance to direct and not doing that, and it stuck with me after we had stopped talking. Do you have any regrets over that? Because it feels like, and I have no idea what your bucket list looks like or anything like that, but I always think like if you want to hire me, one of the easiest ways to do it is something I haven't done before. That's exciting to me. And I wondered about, your decision not to direct when you had that opportunity.
Well, I didn't think it would ever happen. On top of it, I'd never directed, and it's something I've never lied or said I could do something that I couldn't do. Like even out of art school, when I would go for trying to get work, and they'd say, "Can you do this?" I mean, a lot of guys just like lie, and they'd get the job, and I'd go, "No, I can't do that," because I figured I'd get fired anyway. And directing a movie, like I said, I've never directed a movie. And no, I've never have. I mean, I came close when I went to Japan, and I was sort of directing that animated thing. But No, I wish that thing had gotten finished, not because the guy said, well, you'll still get the credit. I didn't care. I don't care about the credit. I just wanted to see I've never cared about movie credits and such. I mean, I got really good ones on The Matrix, and I've gotten others, but they're generally buried. I just do it. But no, I never did. I've always, it's like you. I just like comic books. I like being able to draw. I like that I think that I've actually drawn something. I was like, wow, I actually was able to draw that foot. That's more exciting to me than I don't know. I think I am kind of in one of the Matrix. I was supposed to be in one scene, a couple scenes they're going to put me in, and I kind of begged out at the last minute because I've got work to do. I mean, I was doing all that stuff on the film. They needed this stuff, and it would be a holdup for me to spend 3 days standing there. And so,
Were you working on Bourbon Threat when you were on the set of Cheers?
no, I just done it. I think I'd started Hardboiled, actually.
Oh yeah, it was the Kirstie Alley years. It wasn't the Diane years. That's right. Coach was no longer with us. Probably Woody Harrelson had a cup of coffee.
Woody Harrelson, and he actually came over because I was sitting there and I was because it took all day. We started at 8 a.m. and we didn't get out till like 11:30, and because they're doing the rehearsals. It's really interesting because you see how the script changes through the day because it got way better by the time it went before the cameras. But I'm sitting there and I brought a sketchbook with me and I was doing some drawings and he came over and talked to me, Woody Harrelson. He was really nice. Most of they won't look you in the eye because they don't want to make contact because they don't want, because most of the people there are very hungry. They want to get on a regular show. And see a lot of really hot women there that are trying to, make some points with Ted Danson but he came over and we just talked about drawing a little bit. Kelsey Grammer, him too. He was very nice. He talked with the others would never make eye contact with anybody. But I never wanted to do it again because it was so boring. But once was an interesting experience.
Jeff, do you feel like you keep adding influences in your work? Like for this new Shaolin Cowboy, has anything really captured your eye in the last year or so? It could be filmmakers, could be artists.
Yeah, I'm always, I can't say. It's mostly films, but I look at I hardly ever go to the movies anymore. I think the last movie that I saw since before the pandemic started, I saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and that was the last movie I saw till I went to see The Matrix 4, and that was a real pain in the ass because out here everything's dubbed. And they'll play it maybe in what they call original version, undubbed, in maybe one theater, and it was always at some odd time. And it was like a 2-hour drive each way, but my wife and I went, and I got to see it, but because I wanted to see it on the big screen. I had a lot of people very nicely said, we can send you a code where you can watch it online, but I wanted to see it big. Because once I was curious to see what I did made it on the screen. And, but yeah, I watch like obscure movies. Like a lot of times I'll just put on, YouTube has so many bad movies, and I like listening to them, especially the Hong Kong films because God, the dialogue is just so.
There was that Adam Warren Gen 13 comic that we looked at on the channel, and so many of the dialogue balloons were taken straight from Hong Kong Shaw Brothers type dubs, and they were like iconic. Like people in the comments were like telling us like which flick it's from and stuff like that. Like there's a whole culture around like the weird dubs, and I can't think of any off the top, man, but there were some iconic ones in there.
Well, there's one, and maybe I've told you about this one before, that I have it on DVD, and they put it out on a regular DVD. And I realized that in the American version, the soundtrack was different. And you want to see the American version because it's called The Awaken Punch. And about 40 minutes into it, and I found out later, the action is directed by Wu Ping, who did The Matrix and Crouching Tiger and Iron Monkey, and it's just an amazing choreographer of Kung Fu. And it's a bicycle chase. that is directed like it's a car chase, and it's so bad that when the guy has to brake, you can cut to the hands grabbing a brake. They have like the squealing tires of a car, and they're jumping, and he's chasing a guy who's he's being chased by a guy. It's so funny. And it had like this disco music on it, and it goes on for like 5 minutes. I just meant we can't afford this car chase, but it's just hilarious. Even without the disco music, it'll make you laugh.
We watch those kung fu theaters on Saturday morning, like every weekend religiously, go out and like play ninja and shit, and vigorously trying to like get that sound of like the sound of like the little thing, but like you couldn't, and it's like, why aren't like I'm punching as hard as I can, and I can't even hear this shit, and then you learn about Foley art, much later. But we've just
you have like dislocated elbows and stuff.
They have that stuff they call power powder, and I don't know if it's talcum or what it is, but they put it on clothes so when they get hit, you got some dust comes off it. I'll do that. I'll put that in my comic. If somebody get hit, and I'll have like dust coming off them or particles, because it doesn't make any sense. But most of my stuff doesn't make any sense. But I think it's funny.
In that big image from your studio back in the States before you packed everything up and moved to where you are, you can see the Shaw Brothers DVDs and shit. Were you ever into those they call Bruceploitation movies?
Yeah, I've been watching them on because they're so. And one of them is a guy that's really kind of good. His name is Bruce Chiang, and he's in the Stephen Chow movies, which I love Stephen Chow stuff. I think we have a sort of similar. I'm being very flattering to myself. Feeling about stuff, but yeah, they're so funny because some of those guys really look like him.
Yeah. And for the people at home, Bruceploitation is like after Bruce Lee passes, there's Bruce Li, Bruce Li, Bruce Le,
yeah,
Bruce Lee.
Yeah, it just goes on, and then he did them for years and years, like almost for 5 or 6 years. They were doing new ones.
There's this one that I have. I don't remember the name of it. When DVDs were fresh, like there would be all these, I guess, public domain kind of things where it would be front and back DVDs. You remember this? Where it would be like 50 movies on like 4 DVD discs and stuff. Oh, yeah. And I would just accumulate those things, man, at Best Buy. And the Bruceploitation joint, there's this one, like, they kind of double time the fight scenes and stuff. They did not double time the fights for this shit. So it's all this like slow moving bullshit, and it's like, what the fuck? That's amazing, man? Yeah,
it's almost like slow motion.
They didn't even think to do it. Like it's like, what, man? Like,
well, there's one you've got to find. It's on YouTube. It's called The Dragon Lives Again, and it starts out with Bruce Lee has died, and you're in hell, and you see these pretty girls, and they go, wow, I heard Bruce Lee died. Whoa, here he comes now. And they roll this gurney out, and it's like a body that's covered with a sheet. And it looks like it's got a big boner. Because one of the legends is that he died with an erection. So they go, oh, that's Bruce Lee. Oh, look at that. Whoa. And they go, oh, what's this? And they reach in under the thing, and it's like looks like they're grabbing his junk. But that's where he's got his nunchucks. But the thing is he fights Zatoichi, Dracula, the Man with No Name, James Bond, and at one point he's in a bar with Popeye. This thing is so crazy. And it starts this guy called Bruce Chiang who plays, and like he doesn't look anything really like Bruce Lee, and they go, well, when you die, your face changes. That's why he doesn't look like the Bruce Lee we're used to. It's like, oh, there you go.
I mean, the first Bruceploitation movie is his last movie. When they double impose his face like in a freeze frame over top of a body that's moving and doing stuff. They have his fake they have the funeral, which is like, I think, footage from his real funeral procession.
It is. Yeah.
Do you know this? And,
no, this is new to me.
And then for the rest of the movie, there's a dude with a beard like that glued onto his face, if I remember that correctly. But that's the one with, like, I think it's Kareem in the yellow outfit and stuff. All that stuff is real.
Yeah, that was from that last movie that he made, and they put him in that yellow jumpsuit that that Uma Thurman is wearing,
right?
And they put him wearing a motorcycle helmet, the actress, so that you didn't have to see that it was actually Bruce Lee.
Yeah,
like but you've got 20 minutes of that film that is really great. That that they don't even use all of it. The actual last 25 minutes that Bruce Lee was directing the movie before he died, and with the Tower of Death was the title of it, and they put it in there, but they cut it up. It's like, why would you cut that stuff up? Just leave it in there.
So Uncle Jeff, where would we see that other stuff? I've been taking notes.
Uh-oh.
Is it on a DVD or something?
Well, you can find it now, yeah, because there's the Tower. It's just Tower of Death, and I think there's a Criterion collection of all the Bruce Lee movies, and I think it's on there. I mean, the way he did it, and it's got it's just him fighting. He ends up fighting Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and it's pretty because I mean the size difference is so. He does this thing where he kicks him, and he just leaves like a footprint on his chest. And that stuff's pretty neat, and it's, but you never got to finish.
All of this stuff that we're talking about, man, it's in Shaolin Cowboy. Like the Bruce Lee fighting, this cowboy and Popeye and all this. Like any of your crowd shots have this kind of thing. That's the thing about your comics, Jeff. It's like there's like a segment of comics where you could tell that the creator is fully invested and doing exactly what they want to do. Xenozoic Tales comes to mind. The Goon, Eric Powell comes to mind. He's drawing the stuff he wants to draw. Mike Allred's Madman comes to mind for that. There aren't that many. Sin City, I think, is one.
Red Room, Street Angel. You guys, yeah. I mean,
the other ingredient I would add to the Shaolin Cowboy thing is Will Elder.
Yeah, but Uncle Jeff says that Will Elder ain't his dude, right?
No. I remember when you said it. It's funny because it kind of comes from a lot of it comes from there was a page of I think it has this Mad comic, and it was the first issue where Mad went into magazine format, and they did a parody of a film called Vera Cruz, which was with Gary Cooper and Burt Lancaster. And there's like this amazing downshot of like this barroom fight. And it's got all like, I don't know, it's got like duotone and cross hatching, and it's fantastic. And that thing influenced me a lot. And also with the gag stuff was watching French films. I love this guy named Jacques Tati. And I don't know if you've ever seen any of his films, but the guy was a keen observer of humanity. And he only did like 4 films, but there's all these little details, and you watch, and like in the corner of one of his shots is just people doing stuff, but they're super, and they're not for everybody. I've already taken some friends from Hanna-Barbera to see him, and they still make it to this day. They make fun of me. Yeah, you and your Jacques Tati. There's this music, and I think they hated him, and I go, well, I don't know what to tell you. I think, but I mean, I like like Buster Keaton and those guys. Those guys are all. Like those kung fu guys all got stuff from Buster Keaton, because it's gags and stuff, the visual gags, and using the physical areas that they're at to come up with their action sequences. But for me, it's that, and I mean and Mobius too, because like we went through the Big Tomorrow, all these little details in the background, and when you got a crowd, you have people doing different stuff. I mean, I like Will Elder, but I can't say that I was. I'm flattered. But,
I'm looking at dogs with knife hands.
Yes.
Instead of paws, man. In this old one, and that's the other piece too, man. Like the imagination just never ceases. Like the new ideas that you're able to like put in there, it baffles my mind. Like it just really feels like you're putting everything you have into everything you do, and there's always more.
Well, too nice. That dog thing, I always thought someone's going to get mad at me for doing that, because how can you mutilate dogs like that, put knives on them? I don't know. It's just weird. To me, it was funny. I mean, I had no idea I was going to do that. It was in that one double page thing, and they just always like to put dogs and things. And that comes from this guy, Jacques Tati, too. He'd always have like dogs like in the corner peeing or doing something. And I always thought it was funny. So I always put dogs or cats or, it doesn't mean anything. And it's probably a waste of time.
Always super envious of the studio setup, man, and all the stuff you have on those shelves. Like, are you constantly looking at that stuff when you're not drawing? Is that where this imagination comes from? Is that where?
Boredom. I can say boredom. Not really. I mean, I hate to say this. I've got some books that are still wrapped in cellophane. I haven't looked at them yet. I'll go think, oh yeah, and I got to be careful because one time I visited Harlan Ellison and I realized he had so much stuff, and he was yelling because, oh, how come you didn't send me this or send me that? And I said, I did send it to you. He goes, no, 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 no. And I had, but he had so much stuff. He had like people full time that were just always doing his collection. And I was like, I don't want to be like that, but it's kind of hard. I'll get like stuff and I'll stack it somewhere. I forget that I go, oh, I got 2 copies of, the Master of the Flying Guillotine because I forgot I already. You ever seen that one?
Oh yeah, classic, man. Coolest weapon ever.
Yeah.
Whenever I was a kid, in the early '90s, that's when the Wu-Tang Clan came out, and there were these. They sort of worked out some deal where they licensed their name with these VHS tapes, and then they released all these Chinese films with like the ones that influenced them were under this like Wu-Tang brand, and then a bunch of others too. So like those things, and they were cheap. They were $5-10. Like I had dozens of those things, and Master of the Flying Guillotine is one of the heaters for sure.
I went. The first one, big one in America, was 5 Fingers of Death, and I was terrified to see it. I didn't see it because it was too violent for me. As odd as that might be to hear me say that. And then when I saw on TV, I saw a flying guillotine. It scared the crap out of me, and I was like 20 years old or something because they had this German techno music, and every time he'd come out, it'd be like, and you, I smell blood, and he'd throw it, and it was fake as hell, but it was so fake it kind of looked. I was like, man, he's like, there's no safe place for this guy throwing this. It looks like a Shriner hat, with a blaze on it, and then this fake, the fake built up body with it fall back and squirting blood, and I couldn't sit through it. It terrified me. That's when I think about it. It's because I've seen so much horrible stuff since. It was like, but God, those things were so goofy. Jimmy Wang Yu.
When I first got Netflix, they had some stuff, man. They had all the Gordon Liu flicks and
Wow.
that kind of shit. But like that just evaporated. That's all gone, man.
Yeah. But you can find a lot of that stuff, like I say, on YouTube. But some of it is, the quality is so bad. But it's not any worse than the videotapes. But as the dubbing of that stuff just kills. There's always the same voices, just like the Japanese films.
And sometimes the guy would do the girl's voice. Like it would be like one dude's voice to voice every freaking character, man, including the girls.
And the music in those films, there's like key film scores for Hong Kong flicks. One is a Western called Duel at Diablo by Neil Hefti, who did the Batman TV show theme. It's in all these Shaw Brothers films. It's like in all these. They just, I guess, bought the record and just ripped them off. And they use this Mel Brooks music from silent movie all the time. And it's a serious picture. And all of a sudden they've got this goofy, I don't know if you ever saw the movie, but this goofy, and they outlawed Josie Wales. And they'll use music from like Star Wars. It's like, I can't even believe that they could even show this stuff here because the copyright infringement of these things. And that always says original score by, whoever it is. There's nothing original in it. This guy just, went down and got the soundtrack and cribbed a.
Should be a DJ credit.
You ever go?
The score?
You ever go down the rabbit hole?
They were the first samplers I ever heard of for those guys.
Yeah, man, totally. You ever go down the YouTube rabbit hole of just watching video compilations of the Wilhelm scream?
No.
You know what I'm talking about?
No, I think I know.
So it's the same scream like sample that was in some cowboy movie in like the 50s or something.
Oh, this is great.
Yeah. And that scream is used maybe 5 times in different Star Wars flicks. Like Steve Spielberg uses it in Indiana Jones. It has a name. It's the Wilhelm scream, and you could watch choose what length you want to watch a compilation of this stuff in many different contexts.
That's hilarious.
Usually people getting shot, but initially it was bow and arrow, but it's transcended to laser weapons and things like that. And the scream, you've heard
laser
it.
Weapons.
You've heard it. The scream. It's very, very famous, man.
The Japanese and the Chinese movies, they all have the same stock shot of lightning. It's amazing. It's just like it's the same. I don't know where they got this thing. It's just kind of a weird animated lightning bolt that shoots across the screen. They use it all the time. And they use it in some cheap Italian horror films too.
Yeah, I was just thinking like the Italians are good for that stuff, to use like this mismatched stock footage for, like, we were watching Cannibal Holocaust a couple days ago, and there's, you know, they're in the bush and out comes a jaguar and stuff, and so clearly that's just a whole different, like, the lighting's all different
course.
and stuff, and then they just point and shoot a gun. I feel like you could learn about filmmaking that way. Like, okay, you don't need everything, you just got to find some of this stuff.
Well, back when, you know, let's go back to when they were talking about, I was offered to maybe direct something, and I had told the Wachowskis, yeah, they asked me to, and I told them I couldn't do it. They go, Jeff, we could tell you everything you know in 20 minutes. So you get yourself a good cinematographer, you'd be fine. But anyway, did you ever see those Paul Naschy Wolfman movies? There's like a whole series of Wolfman meets Frankenstein, but they're really like, and it's just, I don't know if they're Spanish or German, or I think they're Italian, but they actually do one where he goes to Japan too, and he fights like demons over there. But the guy's always, he's like this poor man's Lawrence Talbot from the Wolfman, and it's always like, and he dies at the end of each movie, but he's still alive, and he's the same guy. He has the same name. And, those are worth, because they're just so kind of bad and cheesy.
I always like those Abbott and Costello ones.
Oh.
My pops always has those like DVR'd, and I watch them whenever I go over there. And what's interesting is, like, Abbott and Costello are like buffoon, you know, just kids or whatever, like adult babies or something.
Yeah.
But the horror stuff in those flicks is played straight up. Like, people are
Yeah.
dying and getting thrown out of windows and stuff. So you have these doofuses in the midst of like universal horror.
Because you have a bunch of the craftsmen. You know, like, you're hiring the same makeup artists that are like working on Frankenstein. Just come on over to our lot.
And it's Bela and like the real guys.
Yeah, you got this. It was the only time, only other time he actually played Dracula was in the after Dracula was, you know, they'd get, you know, Lon Chaney or John Carradine, and that's not Dracula. They're all too skinny. Or there was that, like, they had Lon Chaney Jr. playing him, and you know, he always looked like he was an alcoholic. It's like, you know, he didn't look suave or sophisticated at all. They called him Count Alucard.
Yeah, man.
Dracula spelled backwards.
Totally. Like, we know that one from Castlevania video games, and that's in the Hammer horror flicks too. Alucard. It's grown its own mythology.
I didn't know that because I watched that the Castlevania TV show. I didn't know that was a video game.
Oh yeah, one of the classic Nintendo joints, man. Straight up.
Wow.
Jeff, we could talk for hours and hours, and we do talk for hours and hours. I look forward to our next conversation, but we should really point people in a direction to keep their eyes peeled for the new Shaolin Cowboy. Whenever we set this up, we set it up with the idea that it was going to be coming out in March.
Yeah, well, originally it was supposed to, but because Dave was really, really tied up, and I didn't want to push him. I said, give him some more time. But rather, you know. I mean,
So what are we looking at? How many issues?
7, starting in May.
And the 7 issues are done, so it's going to be coming out on a...
I've been done for, it's like one of the rare times. It was like, wow, footloose and fancy free. Yeah.
I mean, assuming that's how you spent your COVID time?
Yeah, I was, because I mean, I was so terrified that, well, I'm going to get it and die, because I'm not a young guy, and I have a little bit of an asthma. I go, I got to at least finish the pencil part of it. So I just kept drawing and drawing and drawing, and then I finished it. And I was feeling a little more optimistic about the world, but I got to ink this thing. 205 pages of inking, one after the other. Don't do that. I tell myself every time I'm not going to do that, because I always do that. I never stop and ink one issue and move on to. I always, you know, it's nice to be drawing. I mean, you know, I remember I had to stop to do the covers. Like, it's nice just to be drawing instead of, you know, just, you know, taking the cap off the switching pens, switching from a 005 to a 01 to a 03 to a 08. I'm always dropping them and losing them. And I don't know about you guys, but I always want to milk the most out of that pen before I throw it away. So I'm like, it's getting pretty rough. And I go, no, if I twist it just to the side, can you do that? Can you like look at the tip and see kind of where that's where the good edge is?
Oh yeah.
I do. I tape mine. Like once they get into like the second team, you know, they've been used. They're not perfect, but
Yeah.
they still have some ink left. And but I need that good tip sometimes. So I put a piece of tape around them, and that's they're moving their way into the end.
Here's a B-lister right there, man. Pretty good for speed lines in the back if I'm going manga flavored, or body hair.
Yeah.
Still has a use.
But I'll use the number 1 too. That's just a thicker one. Sometimes really like a heavy outline, but like
Do
the
you use
8, I don't.
Do you use the brush one, like the brush pens?
I did once. I inked a Rip Kirby pencil that Jack Kirby, Theakston put out a book that was supposed to benefit Roz Kirby, and they asked people to ink a page, and I got Rip Kirby, and from Boy Commandos. Now, was it Rip Kirby or is it Rip Carter maybe of the Boy Commandos? Rip Kirby was the detective. That I inked with. I used a brush. I don't know if it looked good or not.
It's really interesting. Like I just look at this stuff and you get some interesting like thick and thins. Like I'm looking at the pig head outline and stuff, and there's some real taper to the line, and it's very bold and stuff.
They're like a number 3 or some of those, they'll get soft and they kind of mush, and you can kind of get kind of a I may be flattering myself, kind of a brush effect, kind of. I don't know. Like I was telling, I talked to Jim and I felt really like, I don't know if the inking is looking good on this new one, and I just have to hide them. I'd put them away and not look at them, because otherwise it's just, maybe I'll just shoot the pencils. And but somebody scared me off that. They told me, oh no, you can't. Yours wouldn't look good. And it's still in the back of my mind. It won't look good.
Yeah, it depends how long ago that conversation was, man. Because
it was 7 years ago, so it still sticks with me. I can't. It's just and I'm really flattered that Jim, that you thought enough of that to run it like that. But I still think maybe I should have inked it, because I hope I don't embarrass him.
It's fantastic. The Hulk cover, is reproduced from pencils, and I even colored some of it with colored pencils. Try to push that texture a little bit more, in the coloring too. So people are gonna love it.
The censored cover. Did I have something else on there? Did I actually draw his face on the side of the tank?
No, I
was gonna do a little decal that had like Trump's face on it with like skull and crossbow. But I thought that sounded like the kind of thing that they would be concerned about. But I thought the number would be okay.
Yeah, that one surprised me, but
I like the fact that I was great, because you switched the numbers in 54, and I go, that's the year I was born. That's cool. And they wouldn't even let us put the number. They go, I don't know that, Darrow. Maybe it means something like Spider-Man screws babies or something like that.
We could circle it back, man, to like artists sneaking shit in, man, because I think that they're still shaking up from some dude doing an X-Men comic, like snuck in all kinds of like awful shit that like got by an editor, and now they're just like, if they're scrutinizing, and if it doesn't make sense, if it's not so clear to them, they're gonna ask for some changes.
See, outside of a Hanna-Barbera, I never put something rude that I think a kid that would get him in trouble, because like somebody's mom saw that I'd drawn, like whatever.
It's kind of miraculous for how much work they produce in such a fast way.
Yeah,
that there's not all kinds of stuff slipping through.
You got to try.
They one of the funny notes I got from an editor was asking me, there's like a panel with this alien kid manipulating the Hulk, and it looks like it could be a different language or something in the word balloon. And they're like, is there a message in this? Like, what does this say? And I was like, you tell me. This is the exact word balloon from issue 300. I have no idea if there's something buried behind this. But yeah, it was. But, how do you know if you're an editor? Like, it is a weird. It's got to be vigilant these days, I suppose.
Pushing the broom, man. Pushing the broom, looking busy.
I mean, back when the comics were doing so bad, and they hit on erotic comics, and then those were selling for a little while. And a guy I went to art school with did one, and we're total style opposites. And he asked me to ink one of his stories. And once again, I got bored, and I drew some stuff. And then, they're hardcore comics, and he still censored me. He changed the stuff that I put in there. It's like, wow, is it a porn comic? I mean,
Well, how about that baffling piece that we just did today, man? Looking at The Long Tomorrow, and they just arbitrarily, it's not even really I mean, who knows why they took one panel and blew it up and cropped a piece of it.
Yeah, it doesn't make, and how do they do it without, it's just weird.
It's like they took the shape of the panel that it was, and they blew up the image, and that's the image that they shoehorned into that size panel, because everything else looked the same. But so it's like, and also it was that Cthulhu thing getting splatted against the wall, and this is after we just seen it twist around a guy's dick and tweaking nipples and stuff. But that's too far. You can't splat a Cthulhu against the wall. We can't show that, but we could show nipple tweaks and a spurting cock with tentacles pulling on it.
I remember maybe the nipple tweak thing that I told you. I remember when they did the Matrix sequels, there's one sequence where they're in this bar, and it's like a leather bar. And in the foreground, you don't even know, unless you really, there's someone, and someone tweaks somebody's, nipple, but it's under, like, I think it's under plastic, so it's not like a naked one. But at the time, the head of Warner Bros. Said, "You got to cut that thing out of there. Yeah, cut that out." And they said, "Well, it's an R-rated movie to me." He goes, "I don't want some soccer mom to take her kid to the Matrix and see that thing, and they go, they're not even supposed to be in the theater. It's an R-rated movie for the violence." And so, and they managed to keep the thing in there, but it just made no sense to me. It's like, that kid is not even supposed to be in the theater, and you're going to take it out just in case some mother takes her, some soccer mom takes it. That's those literal words he said. I don't want a soccer mom to.
Yeah, we would call those Karens now.
Right.
Yes.
That would be a Karen who's getting righteous, man. Listen, Uncle Jeff, the book starts to come out in May. New Shaolin Cowboy, monthly basis. In the meantime, is there any place where people can follow you and chart the progress and keep updated? Do you keep up with your Twitter very much?
I don't do it too much. I'm on Facebook. I got Geoff Darrow. I put stuff on there. And, sometimes I go on Twitter. Not too often. I put something on there the other day and got in trouble. Someone.
The order stuff must be possible right now, because we saw some we saw the Mignola variant and stuff. So stores can start ordering this thing.
Yeah, go into your store and ask them to get Shaolin Cowboy. They go, what?
You know what we're going to have to do in May, when this, like the week before this comes out, we got to have you back, and we got to push people into the shops, man, to scoop it up.
Well, after this, I mean, you're going to edit this, right? I mean, like somebody said, "Boy, you really talked a long time." Well, because that last one we did, I thought it was going to be like 45 minutes.
The whole style of the shoot interview is pop the camera on and just have a conversation.
Yeah, I love. My favorite ones are the ones that go like that. There's some of them that you do that I realize they got their shtick down, and they got the answer for this, and they're still interesting. But the ones that, like, it's like, the David Cho ones, gold.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. But listen, we've taken up hours and hours of your time. Always appreciate it. This is, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is an abbreviated version of the conversations that go down when I like to think that you're inking and I'm inking at the same time, Jeff.
That's the best time to talk.
Sometimes I am. Sometimes I'm not.
Last time we chatted, man, I was drawing a guy getting his face split open, and his brain was exposed in the middle.
I was doing that hard-boiled collection cover. Actually, I did draw.
Did Frank give his approvals on that piece? It was a good one.
I don't know, and I don't. I don't think, because I haven't inked it yet. I haven't shown it to Dark Horse. I'm not even sure. I kind of wonder if they'll, because I mean, it's pretty violent.
It's hard boiled.
Yeah, it should be violent.
Yeah, but it's still on the cover. I don't know.
False advertising if that cover's not violent.
Thank you so much. It's always a privilege. Thank you. It's lots of fun.
All right, everybody, go buy that Shaolin Cowboy
Yes.
comic. Go to your local comic shop. Get it put on your pull list. It's going to be coming out on a monthly basis. And let's goose those numbers up, man. Sell some comics.
Kayfabe effect, Shaolin Cowboy.
Yeah, how could you not, man? I mean, Jeff is
We'll find a way.
putting it all his cards on the table for you guys, man.
It's action packed.
What's that?
It's action packed.
That's an understatement.
I'll say.
That is an understatement.